reporters for his work with BBC Television, The Guardian, and Rolling Stone. Greg Palast is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and his latest book, which he'll sign afterwards, is Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, How to Steal an Election in 9 Easy Steps. I am very pleased to announce you are not hearing this because it's not supposed to be out on the news until tomorrow, but we just found out that this new book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, is going to be on the New York Times bestsellers list, so it's very exciting. Very exciting. Greg Palast investigates Karl Rove, the Koch gang, and their buddies. The book includes some great illustrations by comic book Ted Rawl. Greg Palast is funny, and he says he loves this, so I'm going to say it. He's funny, he's weird, it's so true, sensual. And here at Green Festival, we're going to have our only all-naked appearance, the full frontal Greg Palast. Give him a great Green Festival welcome to our stage.
We've got work to do. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Green Fest. Wonderful today. As opposed to what was happening in Tampa, the Mean Fest. I want to thank you for being here. And by the way, don't move, because after me will be Ralph Nader, or as the Democrats called him in 2000, Darth Nader. You know, he's the guy that lost the election to the Democrats. Actually, if I remember, he was the only Democrat on the ballot. Okay, I can see that there's 47 percenters out there. You haven't had a real job since FDR, right? Actually, there was one 47 percenter who came to my appearance in Seattle, packed out town hall, and he came up to me and he'd just come back. He was a prisoner interrogator for military intelligence in Anbar province. And he came back, he's retired military. And of course, he's another guy who doesn't take responsibility for himself. And he knew, he just wanted to tell me that he understood why Romney's kids, 5 boys, didn't volunteer for the military. Apparently, they were stuck in the car elevator with the horse. You know, dressage horses move sideways. Romney trained him. Don't make fun of the car elevator, because you know, those cars are actually quite old. They can't take the stairs. Yeah, let's go back to 2000. For those who know Greg Palast, you probably, in America, I report for BBC Television and write for the Guardian papers. And we did a story. We uncovered a set of discs, cracked those discs, names of the felons, tens of thousands of black folk removed from the voter rolls of Florida in 2000 because they were criminals. All of them. They were all guilty of voting while black. Now, I'm not guessing, because, and here in the new book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, is a picture of a Florida felon purge list. There it is. And if you look, right next to the voter's name, it says BLA. BLA. Now, by the way, the New York Times, how did you find out about that story? Okay? There's always a story of the story. That story bounced off the electronic Berlin Wall in America. It was the top of the BBC Nightly News where I reported. It was the top front page of the #1 paper in the English language, The Guardian. In America, it was on Channel 0, except for Democracy Now!, as opposed to the Democracy Later stations. It was gotten out word by word, book by book, the best democracy money can buy. And now, damn it, I've got a sequel. Why? America, I wrote a book back in 2000 about how our elections were fixed, millions of people whose votes were thrown in the garbage, and I thought, well, that's it, fixed. And there was a law passed, the Help America Vote Act, written by Karl Rove and George Bush. You know what happens when Karl Rove and George Bush decide to help you vote? So here's the stats, okay? But first I want to tell you this purge list. Let me tell you about the criminals on the purge list. There is Thomas. See, the way it's done is databases. They get a big database of criminals from all over America. And they look for them if they've gone to Florida, and they remove them from the voter rolls. Okay, because you can't be a felon and vote in Florida. So there is, right here, Thomas Brown. Believe it or not, there is a Thomas Brown in Florida on the voter rolls. And they know he's a criminal because right next to his name it says BLA. So Thomas Brown lost his vote because there's a Thomas Brown somewhere. But let me tell you about this list. It's not Katherine Harris's list. I know Katherine Harris called Greg Palast twisted and maniacal, and that may be true, but she didn't say I was inaccurate. And this is the one that they're using now. It's not over. They are back in overdrive. And it's the BLA voters. Now, who are these BLA voters? Well, there's Bobby Moore, like my co-author Bobby Kennedy. There is Robert Moore who committed a crime in Ohio. There really is a Robert Moore, believe it or not, and now Bobby Moore, the nickname, they got that through their algorithm. So Robert Moore commits a crime, Mr. Robert Moore commits a crime in another state, and Mrs. Bobby Moore loses her vote in Florida. B-O-B-B-I. Devious. Not only that, but since Robert Moore was convicted in the year 2014, this guy is really devious. It's like Minority Report in every way. That's the new list. How many people on this list are innocent? Of nearly 100,000? Well, exactly 100%. Exactly 100%. Because I went to the Attorney General. I said, would you arrest an illegal voter? Absolutely. Well, here's the list, 94,000. Arrest them. I said, well, that's just a list. It's just the list of BLA voters who've lost their vote, including Willie Steen, Gulf War veteran, takes his 5-year-old kid, by the way, in 2000, takes his 5-year-old kid to vote with him so he'll see how American democracy works. Boy, the kid got a lesson. Told your dad's a criminal. He got a letter of apology after the election. He couldn't vote. Right? That was so, got an apology from Katherine Harris, 2004. They took away his vote again. It's continued on. It's not over. Now, let's add it up. Okay, Palast, who cares? What's the numbers? Well, in Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, and by the way, to make it easy, right in the middle is a 50-page comic book by Ted Roth. For those of you who've gone through America's No Child's Behind Left school system, we've made it easier. And around my investigative reporting and my worst jokes is a couple of chapters, the beginning and end, written by law professor Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, how many votes are we talking, guys? Take a look. There were 700, if you look in chapter 1, 767,023 provisional ballots cast and never counted. There were 1,451,116 votes cast and not counted because they were spoiled. How do you spoil a vote? Leave it out of the fridge? There were 488,136, nearly 500,000 absentee ballots mailed in and thrown away and not counted. And not counted. 2,383,587 would-be voters purged from the voter rolls. That was the last election. Altogether, Altogether, votes and voters, 5,901,814 votes and voters not counted. That's the official number from down the street at the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission. Because in America, we not only count some of the votes, but we actually count the votes we don't count. Until now, by the way, the GOP Congress has removed all the funding for gathering those numbers because they found that someone actually added them up. This is called journalism, which I learned from Yogi Berra, the great investigative journalist who said it's amazing what you can see when you're looking. So in America, 5.9 million votes and voters we know were removed. Legal voters, good votes. How do you do it? How do you do this? How do you get 5.9 million votes and voters thrown in the dumpster and get away with it? And how are they going to triplet this year? Which they will and they are. How? And the answer, well, let me give you a count. There's Coke, Themis, Data Trust, Iceman, Vulture, and Turd Blossom. Now, Turd Blossom, if you remember, is the flowery name that George Bush gave his senior advisor, Karl Rove, okay, who was also known as Bush's brain, so you know what Bush thought of his own brain. So Mr. Blossom right now has a giant data mining operation looking for BLA voters, student voters, other Jewish voters, bluish voters of all types. It's a drone operation on the voter rolls. 22 million people now. This is the official number. Write it down. 22 million people have been purged from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. You think you're registered? Better check. Now, how does this happen? Why does it happen? It happens, and that's why the book is called Billionaires and Ballot Bandits for a reason. Because no one steals votes to steal elections. David Koch was going to run for governor of Kansas as a Democrat. He ran against Reagan, on the third party ticket, calling Reagan a socialist lefty. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. No one steals votes to steal elections. They steal votes for the money. It's always follow the money. These guys are not there are 37 billionaires who had breakfast with Mitt Romney last Friday in New York. I went there myself. I was going to join them. I was hungry, but I forgot my checkbook. You'll see that they give Amy some of the film that I was escorted out hungry. What were they doing there? What were they doing there? One billionaire is named Ken Langone, who was there, and he said it very directly. Ken Langone said, I'm not contributing to Romney. He gave $1 million to the Romney PAC called Restore Our Future. The 37 billionaires want to restore their future. He says, I'm not making a donation to Mitt Romney. I am making an investment. What's his investment? And what does he do with the million? Number one, remember I said, we talked about the wipeout of the black voters from the voter rolls? Who came up with this list? A company called Database Management, put together by a billionaire named Ken Langone. Why? Because there was another guy named Elliot Spitzer who had charged Langone with insider trading. The only thing that Mr. Langone could do was buy himself a Justice Department. And that required removing those voters, those BLA voters, so that there would be no more justice at the Justice Department. It's back. Karl Rove now has $250 million provided for him by guys who go by the name Iceman, Vulture, Snake. I didn't give them these names. These are the billionaires' nicknames given to them by their grateful bankers. And what have they given the money for? Something, this data mining system called Data Trust. And Data Trust is what is hunting for the BLA voter. And why? Because added up, even if you've gone through the No Child Behind Left program, you will know that if you have the 99% vote and have their votes counted, that the 1% is going to lose every time. So they have to do two things. They have to convince some voters to vote against themselves, but that's not good enough. They have to make sure that at least that 5.9 billion never get their votes counted. How do you do it? Now, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits says how to steal an election, 9 easy steps. They have 9 methods. 9 methods. Now, I just told you about the first one, purging. They come up with a cockamamie reason to go into the voter rolls. They remove 22 million names. 22 million names have been removed. Okay. Including my assistant, who should know better. He's listed as an inactive voter. After forgetting my advice to check your registration. Now, second, what's another way? What does the database, data trust use? What does Karl Rove use? It's a trick called caging. Now, you send a letter to a voter, first class, do not forward. Hi, voter. If the letter at the registration address comes back undeliverable because you said do not forward, the letter comes back into literally a physical cage. Tens of thousands of voters are put on a caging list, and they are challenged when their absentee ballot comes in, or they're removed from the voter rolls, or stopped from voting. Now, you say, well, that's fine. We have to stop voter fraud in America, right? That's what we've heard from the foxhole. We've heard it from the peacock and the eyeball. You know, CBS eyeball. It's actually not an eyeball. It's a pimple on Viacom's rectum. Now, letters come back. Who did they send those letters to, and why did they come back? The letters were sent to, in August, to traditional African American colleges when the kids are away on vacation. It was sent to elderly Jews in Miami because they're snowbirds who aren't around in August. See, they go after the elderly of Zion. But the big one, they sent letters to homeless shelters where people don't always get their mail. But look at this list, right in Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. Look at the list. You can see these yourself when you get the book. Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station, Naval Air Station. Karl Rove, the Republican National Committee, under contract with Rove, was sending out hundreds of thousands of letters to BLA voters at military bases where soldiers are registered, active duty. When the letters came back, because they wrote do not forward, they challenged their vote. Now let me tell you something, because Mr. Romney doesn't know this because his sons never wrote a letter to him from Afghanistan. American soldiers are allowed to vote from under a Humvee. That's their right. And I talked to one soldier. He said, I got to vote. He said, I mailed in my ballot. I said, you did? Yes, you did. You were on a challenge list. Did you know that whether your vote was counted? He said, well, no, I mailed it in. He said it wasn't counted. Systematically, while waving the flag, while calling for more bombs over Tehran, they've been systematically challenging the votes of active duty soldiers from in combat zones. Now, it's not just a bad idea. It's not just sickening. Law professor, dean of the Pace University School of Law, Bobby Kennedy, says it's a crime. It's a go-to-jail crime. Okay? So question, who is it that committed the crime? Well, the letters, the caging lists, came from the computer of Mr. Tim Griffin. Now, if you watch the Republican convention, you would see Mr. Griffin and you would see very clearly he's not in jail. He's not in jail. In fact, he's in Congress. He was the man who represented the Republican congressional delegation at the GOP convention. And now, how did I get these emails? They weren't from him. Because I believe him when he says they weren't his, even though they came from his computer. Because I do know that Mr. Rove, a computer expert, doesn't keep a computer of his own. They came from Rove's office. Now, Karl Rove doesn't usually send me stone-cold, documentary incriminating evidence of felony crimes. It usually makes me work a little harder usually, but in fact, it's because of Tim, who's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Congressman Tim sent the emails to the rnc.org, which is a website owned by a friend of mine, John Wooden, who sent them to me. Now, BBC says I can't look at someone else's email unless there's evidence of crime. And I said, look at this. That's why I went to Kennedy. He said, yeah, put them in jail. Read them their rights. Who else? Who was Griffin's assistant on this game? A guy named Matt Rhodes. Where's Matt Rhodes today? He is the campaign chairman for someone named Mitt Romney for president. He's not in jail either. He may be in the White House. Okay. Now, this isn't about re-electing Obama or his mama. I don't care. That's not my job. That's your problem, gringos. I'm a British reporter, despite my accent. I am concerned that these votes get counted. And so, that's caging. I told you about purging. I'm not going to go through all 9. We don't have time, and you got to get the book, which is put out. By the way, my capitalist big publisher is not happy that I've done this because I put it out, Bobby Kennedy and I and Ted Rall, through our not-for-profit foundation. No one's making a buck. We're losing money. But we have at the back of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits something very important for you. And here's a poster of it. You can also download at ballotbandits.org this poster. 7 ways to beat the ballot bandits. What you can do to at least protect your own ballots and those of your loved ones. I call this our ballot condom. Okay? So for safe voting. Now you can get your ballot condom at ballotbandits.org. You don't have to get the book, but you do have to download this item, send it around, download it, print it out, or order copies. We're giving out many to our partner organizations. LULAC, Operation Bush Rock the Vote. And we're trying to get the word out to protect yourself. You can do it. Now, the truth is that there's 9 ways to steal an election. We only have 7 ways to protect yourself because the billionaires are always 2 steps ahead of us, but we're working on it. Now, how do they get this money? Rove has $250 million, much of it going to data trust, not to convince you to vote that you need a president with a car elevator. It's to eliminate the voters who won't go along with it. But that's not good enough. There is another database called Themis, created by a couple of guys who have established a social welfare organization, a charity under the IRS code, called Americans for Prosperity. I think it's their prosperity. Anyway, their names are Koch, David and Charles. Now, where does this come from? How can you have a charity? By the way, American Crossroads, people call it the Rove Operation a PAC. It isn't. It's a charity, social welfare organization. How did this happen? Because besides Citizens United, which made, as you know, corporations are people. You know all the corporations which have gone to Iraq and lost their legs, right? Corporations are people. Corporations can be thrown out of their homes in a foreclosure, is that right? Anyway, how did this happen? It goes way back. I went into my files. And it goes back to an investigation I did, because before I was an investigator for BBC television, I was an investigator I was an investigator for the U.S. government, racketeering, fraud, and there was oil missing from the Osage Indian Reservation in Oklahoma. Some guys were coming on with trucks and pilfering the oil. It was really sharp. They were paid to come in and take the oil from the little stripper wells on this dirt poor Indian reservation. They would take 50 barrels and they would write down 40. They would go to the next stripper well, take 60 barrels and write down 30. So they were stealing a few barrels, skimming it off the top. We filmed this. We followed the trucks back to a loading dock in Oklahoma. And there, was it just some guys stealing this stuff on their own? No. There was a big tall white guy on a loading dock telling those workers, I want more overage. That's the skim. His name, the big guy, named Charles Koch. Now, I had one question. Why? Koch was already a billionaire. He was born a billionaire. You know, his daddy made billions building refineries for Joe Stalin and then formed the John Birch Society. So the Koch brothers already had got their money the old-fashioned way, right? From daddy. Now, so the question was why? Why is this billionaire standing in the Oklahoma desert telling truckers to steal a few bucks worth of oil from an Indian reservation, like $30 a family a week? Why? And he gave an answer. We know that because we had one of his top executives wired who asked the same question. Why? And you know what Koch said to him? It's the front of the book. Koch said, I want my fair share. And that's all of it. That's what they want. All of it. And the only way you can get all of it, you have to include in all of it 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the Capitol. Now, how did they... Now remember, taking oil from an Indian reservation is a federal crime. Taking it from the government treasury, which we split with the American Indians, it's a crime. And an indictment was written up. The FBI guy said, okay, we're going to take Mr. Koch, we're going to give him everything he deserves, including his Miranda rights. And here, right in Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, is the indictment for Charles Koch. But what happened? Racketeering. In the book, it's called Target 67C. Now, what happened? The answer is, he bought a couple senators. Prosecutors serve at the pleasure of the senators. And so the prosecutor not pleasuring the Kochs anymore was removed. The indictments quashed. Grand jury not allowed to see the evidence and dismissed. They walk now. But that wasn't good enough. They needed Congress because there were other charges. So what they did was the billionaire's trick, as you'll find out, which is to make the law, the way that they go straight is that they make the law crooked. They decriminalize what they're doing. They were charged with 350 felony instances of pollution, criminal pollution. They took those oil trucks, after they stole the oil from the Indians, skimmed it off, they got the sludge, and then they poured the gunk into the rivers.